Welcome back to OTB AM. It is 8 o'clock on this Friday morning. So tonight we've got a classic game club coming up on Virgin Media Sport on TV. It's Ireland against England in 2007 at Croke Park. It's going to be myself, Ger, and Adrian Barry doing the honours. Looking back at the game during the week, Adrian, was a fairly pleasurable experience for us all. But for you in particular, it meant kind of reaching into the depths of, I don't know where you keep your memorabilia, but you plucked out the match programme and found a lot of nice stuff in it.
I knew this shit would come in handy at some point, Eoin. I have like a drawer full of match programmes here that for a lifetime I've been wondering, should I just put them in the bin? Like, are they really any use to me? I have a few match programmes from various games I would have gone to, kind of tickets, accreditations, all of that stuff. This one was actually, I was not working at it around that time. I would have been working at most of these games, so that in itself was a bit of an achievement. But yeah, the match programme from 2007, I'm leafing through it here, and just as I do it, I'm sort of wondering if I should actually get my paws off it and sort of put it in a frame at some point. But listen, we'll see about that on. It's an interesting read, €5, pretty good price, I think, for a game of its history.
Yeah, the end of the Celtic Tiger.
Yeah, not quite. It was like 2 a.m. for the Celtic Tiger. It was sort of, the party was still in full swing, and they thought it was going to last for days and days and days.
That's what I mean. It's like the peak of the Celtic Tiger, I should say, just right before the end. So €5 is good value given the times that you did live in.
There are elements of this that are going to be very twee in years to come, like it is only 13, 14 years ago. But one of those ones that's already become a little bit twee is the Heinz have an advert here, and they've taken the unusual step of just printing out the words to the Fields of Athenry, as if people, it comes up over the course of the Classic Game Club where Ger feels that, it's a stadium jam-packed full of hardcore rugby fans. Well, the Heinz ad suggests that maybe this is not exactly the case. And you can see at the very bottom there, if you squint and pinch your screen, you can see lyrics courtesy of H.J. Heinz. You have yourself scratching your head, as it's followed by words and music by Pete St. John, as Heinz have really inserted themselves into the I was going to say a bad word there, into the Fields of Athenry, quite incredibly. And I do wonder, like, when it started to ring out towards the end of the game, like how many people in the match programme out and they were like pelting it out. I mean, maybe not that many.
Well, come day, like, I mean, maybe it was the longest Fields of Athenry ever. You could have got a second or third verse, which the song never tends to get to in the stadium. Of course, people who hate the song would have loved that opportunity to educate themselves and learn the lyrics off and just join in on the festivity.
That's become a very new phenomenon, this hatred of the Fields of Athenry. Plenty of other good stuff as well. I mean, it was a time where the anticipation, obviously, for the Rugby World Cup was fever pitch, I'm going to say, and there was a lot of references to it, including this ad is not aged well, from rtho7.com, who I haven't really heard of very much since, I'd have to admit. Experienced the excitement of Rugby World Cup 2007 in France. I mean, if ever there was some false advertising, this was it. I mean, how many people actually went ahead and bought that ultimate rugby experience, a wide range of hospitality on, and travel packages on offer at Rugby World Cup, all of which will be creative, innovative and original, but it doesn't say the rugby is going to be shit.
I do wonder if that is why Ireland ended up getting caught in an industrial estate, because literally the take-up for those hospitality packages had been through the roof, and all the
rtho7.com were just too successful.
They'd taken up all the good hotel rooms, and Ireland were stuck in a terrible hotel, which essentially cost them their place in the World Cup quarter-final.
I mean, you could be right. It was where all our problems started. Little do we realise this match programme ruined our World Cup. All those GAA fans buying packages to the Rugby World Cup that we never even knew were in the ground. Right, there's a few ads that, just to wrap this thing up, that I wanted to sort of very briefly mention. One of them, he's just a handsome man. He's in his prime. He's endorsing Newbridge silverware. You already know it's going to be. There he is. It's Werner O'Gara with like a shirt on him for giant haystacks. To be fair, look at the size of that cuff. Look at the size of that cuff. that is an oversight. That cuff has never adorned the body of Werner O'Gara in any kind of capacity that didn't involve a photo shoot. Like, that is an oversized cuff right there. But I mean, it's a good cuff link. It's a nice cuff link. Would I buy one off the back of it? Possibly. Come at the hour, come at the man. I mean, if ever there was a truer statement, and indeed even in that game.
I mean, if you're making a menswear ad or a jewellery ad targeted towards men, you probably don't veer too far off that track. That is the definition of how you do it. And it still is, I think.
You get your cuffs out on and you oversize the shit out of them. And you make sure that, I mean, with the cuff, look, the cuff probably stands out just as well on a shirt that Ronan Garn might actually wear. It's a ludicrous. The cuff, if we can see it again, actually takes up statistically a third of the advert. It is an enormous cuff. So obviously we were to see over the years to come the rivalry between that handsome man and another handsome man in the shape of Johnny Sexton, who was really wouldn't have been that well known about at this point. And again, if you squint and pinch your screen there, just second out from the right hand side, you can see a tense looking Johnny Sexton in the lineup for an under-20s match, and an ad for PricewaterhouseCoopers, who were at that point, and I believe still, sponsoring the Ireland under-20s. More important than how everything works is how everything works together. A fresh-faced Johnny Sexton on.
I think condensing it down to PwC was probably a good branding decision in the end. Like, how wide were those under-20s jerseys at the time to actually get the entire thing in? It's amazing article that you got there.
Size fits all.
Anything else from inside the pages?
Yes, the last thing that we have to end on, there should be some sort of a special award, and maybe there was. I mean, the person who came up with the idea of Big Mal in bed with a laptop and to put it in the match programme. I mean, I don't know how much more needs to be said about this, but we're told that thanks to HP Ireland, the innovative video streaming technology provided to the RFU, training sessions can now take place. This is, I'm assuming this is what they're suggesting Big Mal is doing on the laptop, can take place whenever and wherever players like Malcolm O'Kelly feel most comfortable. He certainly looks at 12:36 a.m. the perfect time, it says, for a line-out session. I don't know if that's a euphemism for anything else, but regardless, it's what Big Mal is doing at 12:30 in the morning. He's in bed with his bathrobe on, and a little cup of tea by his bedside, and the laptop out, and he's hard at it.
Well, literally, they were 13 years ahead of the curve there, training sessions from home and all of that. Malcolm O'Kelly, well ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I'm sure. A Big Mal didn't feature that day. He wasn't in the match day squad. He was done out of it by Donnacha O'Callaghan. Mick O'Driscoll was on the bench. He would have been coming towards the, if not having passed the end of it, he would have been past the end. It would have been, his career was over. His Ireland career was over, I'm pretty sure, at that point. It was post, probably quite a few years, in fact, but post that time where Declan Kidney. No, it wasn't. I don't know actually what he was doing. I don't know why maybe he was injured. It was before the Declan Kidney, taking him aside and telling him that, listen, you just haven't been yourself about the place, as a euphemism for your time here is done.
Well, it's going to be a good one tonight. It's Classic Game Club on Virgin Media Sport at 8 o'clock, Ireland against England, the 07 game, where Sheahan Horgan scores the most famous try in Irish rugby history. Sheahan Horgan, who wasn't good enough to make it onto the Meath Mount Rushmore, let us not forget. That very Sheahan Horgan. Shane Hannon, good morning.
Good morning, lads. My word, the thought of that Mal O'Kelly ad is quite terrifying, to say the least.
Is there anybody that you could be not terrified by in a bathrobe in their bed with a HP laptop on their lap? No,
that's it's a disturbing thought. And the cufflinks on Rog as well. I mean, I thought that the purpose of cufflinks were to make your shirt wrists a little bit smaller, but an interesting photo. Yeah, you know,
it's more of an ad for Louis Copeland than it is for Newbridge, I felt.
Yeah, I'm glad though, Adrian, you're collecting the programmes. I'm the same myself, but I always kind of die a little bit inside when you see the old guys at GAA matches that use the programmes to keep their heads dry when the rain kicks in. It actually makes me sad a little bit. So they pay the money for the programme, and then the rain comes in, and then they just destroy it. You have to throw the programme in the pocket when that happens. You have to hold on to these things as a little bit of memorabilia, but some of those guys just don't. They don't get it like you and I, Adrian.
Yeah, well, they also don't have wardrobes full of match programmes that they will never ever see. Shane is the other. So in some ways, my hat is off to them.
What is the intention with the programmes down the line? Is it to throw them all out, Adrian, eventually? And
no, I have. What was the first Triple Crown we had done in like 40 years? It was in the early 2000s. It might have been 03 or 04, and I have those. My first intention, to be absolutely honest with you, was to gather those match programmes, this is obviously now at this point the best part of 20 years later, and put them into a frame at that stage, because we weren't in the habit of winning anything at all, and a Triple Crown was a massive deal. I'm still going to do this at some point, but was to put them into a frame and stick them up on the wall. So actually, maybe today should be the incentive for me to go and do that. I'd have some, if not all, match programs from '09 as well. So maybe this is something I should do. That was the intention of it. And then you kind of start to go to games, and like Shane says, you're there anyway. You have the ticket. Like, frequently you're at a game and you don't really understand the significance of it, like that '07 game that we're talking about later on, until the passing of time. So, like, why not hang on to it for a few years and just see?
Shane, we're starting this morning with the Premier League.
Yep, kicking off with the Premier League news this morning, lads. Clubs have agreed in principle to play matches at neutral venues. It's after concerns were raised by the police over certain fixtures potentially being a risk to public safety. Shareholders have also voted to increase the number of substitutes for these games. Managers will now be able to make 5 changes in each game, with 9 players allowed on the bench, socially distancing, of course. Tottenham Hotspur have borrowed £175 million from the Bank of England to help them battle the financial effects of the football shutdown. It follows the club saying they expect to lose £200 million of revenue in the next year. Some on-the-pitch news: Chelsea appear to have won the race to sign Timo Werner. Striker has scored 24 times in 29 Bundesliga matches and has been a long-term target, of course, for Liverpool. However, their unwillingness to pay RB Leipzig's €60 million release clause this summer has left the door ajar for Chelsea. Werner is expected to sign a 5-year contract at Stamford Bridge. Some golf. Former Ryder Cup captain Paul McGinley has questioned whether Rory McIlroy's decision to publicly air his political viewpoints could negatively impact his golf game. This is in conversation with Off the Ball. Many sports people have publicly addressed the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota. McGinley shared his belief that the Down native's sporting ambitions may be better served if he adopted the approach Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan and others used at the height of their respective careers. That full piece with McGinley, Paul McGinley, that is up on otbsports.com, and of course the new OTB Sports app available for download right now in the Google Play Store or App Store. Some rugby news this morning. RFU Chief Executive Bill Sweeney has revealed extending the Six Nations is one of the options being looked at if the autumn internationals can't take place. England are due to play New Zealand, Tonga, Australia and Argentina in November. Ireland have plenty of games scheduled for that period as well. But with doubts around travel restrictions, contingency plans are being made. The FEI have accepted Bohemians' apology for minor breaches of their training guidelines. Bohs admitted they made an error in allowing 2 groups of 3 players to train at Father Collins Park in Donamead. The club insists they were following all other guidelines, said they'd follow the FEI's advice ahead of collective training resuming for the 4 European qualified teams next week. Today's expected government announcement of the continuation to Phase 2 of the GAA roadmap will bring good news for the Gaelic Games. Its expected pitches with perimeter walkways will be available to reopen as soon as next week. Training could also be brought forward a phase to the end of June. However, the Examiner claims this morning a return to group training for intercounty sides is unlikely until September at the earliest. Some racing today. Newmarket hosts the first Group 1 of the British Flat season this afternoon. Last year's Derby winner Anthony Van Dyke is trainer Aidan O'Brien's main hope of a 9th win in the Coronation Cup. That one is off at 4:25 this afternoon. There's also a 9-race programme at Lingfield. Snooker action as well today, lads. Gerard Green missing out on a place in the winner stage of the Championship League last night. He finished 2nd in Group 14 following defeat to Group winner Gary Wilson and a draw with Mitchell Mann. The Rocket is back in action today. Ronnie O'Sullivan, he's the overwhelming favourite in Group 10. He faces matches with Chris Wakelin, Michael Joju and Kishan Hirani.
Good stuff, Shane. Thanks for that. It is 13 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning. Let us tell you what is coming up over the next little while on OTB AM. So, sports pages coming your way in just a sec. Then we've got Alan Quinlan chatting to us about the potential of summer rugby at around 20 to 9. Then at 9 o'clock, we've got that conversation with Aaron Cunningham, the former Crossmaglen Rangers footballer who's been in New York, who's been part of the protest. He'll be joining us at 9, and then at 15:15, we'll have the Mount Rushmore of Laois. Cliona Foley and Shane Keegan will be our 2 selectors. Time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
Let's start with otbsports.com. We'll see, Graham. That's a quote from John Giles, who's recounted 2 fiery battles with Graham Souness. If you thought Graham Souness was a hard man, surprise, surprise, John Giles was possibly even harder. A couple of other stories on the homepage there. John Giles naming his all-time Scotland 11. That was the hook for their piece last night. We've got that Paul McGinley article there as well, as Shane mentioned, questioning the impact of McIlroy's outspokenness on his golf. There's also news there of the NBA's return 22-team season to resume in Disneyland next month, basically. And my career is over, and this is the pinnacle of Irish rugby for the last 61 years. This is Andy Dunn and some more of his brilliant chat with Joe Malloy from Wednesday Night Rugby.
Actual Sport is back on the back pages for the first time since I've been on AM on for quite some time, and that's fantastic news. The Irish Independent, it's largely to do with the return of the Premier League, possible return of the GAA, and the Chelsea signing of Timo Werner are really the things that dominate across the back pages here. But Matt Law has a story in the Irish Indo. Chelsea swoop for Werner after Liverpool stall on release clause is the story here. He'd been long time linked with Liverpool, big fan of Klopp apparently. Probably didn't go there a little bit sooner on the basis of his playing opportunities. Been a bit stunted. You could say that maybe that remains the case, but it seemed like Chelsea might be about to offload a couple of players, and that on the basis of that he's going to make his way to Chelsea. That Willian and Pedro perhaps leaving Chelsea on. This is quite a significant swoop.
Have Liverpool missed the boat here in a quite significant way? Like, according to Matt Law's piece, the club have stalled on meeting his release clause, which is reported to be worth £53 million. It's the activation of this that has essentially got Werner into Chelsea's possession. It looks like a matter of formality now that he will become a Chelsea player come this summer window, and it's going to be quite a window for them. They've already got Hakim Ziyech lined up to join the club as well. If we're thinking that coronavirus is going to dip spending in football, Chelsea are not going to play by those rules. We've seen Arsenal and Spurs suggest that they're going to look at loans and free transfers. Elsewhere in London, not the case, where they're spending a huge amount of money. But I do think it's going to impact the likes of Liverpool potentially as well, who looked at 53 million quid, also looked at the fact that he's now going to get 200k a week. And they said to themselves, we can't afford this, despite the fact that Werner, as you said, would love to play under Jurgen Klopp. I just wonder if they've dropped the ball here a small bit, and perhaps that's a little bit harsh as well, given that everybody's in a precarious enough financial position.
Look, maybe that has something to do, but as we sit here, you say, well, what would they do with him almost? But I mean, it only takes a couple of games in that, you know, if Salah or Sané or somebody ends up getting, Mane ends up getting injured, and before you know it, it's like, oh, crap, Liverpool have really missed the boat here. So who knows what's at play in the background, because frequently it is stuff, like it is that stuff that relationship existed, or that will for him to play there existed. So we'll see. There's plenty more on that elsewhere as well. Keane Tracy, inside as well, by the way, the last word from me on the Indo, has an interview inside with the former Ireland international Dan Toohey, retired some months back. I was pretty disillusioned with the whole game, did a piece with Off the Ball at that time, and the day you retire you become a nobody, which seems, I mean, more than mildly predicated on the idea that you were somebody to begin with. I don't mean that in relation to Dan Toohey. I mean generally, it seems I mean, I don't know, is that just me? We're told repeatedly by rugby players and professional sports people in the modern day that they, you know, oh, look, we're not somebody special, it's another game, keep the head down. But now Dan Toohey lifts the lid on to tell us that actually professional sports people believe they are actually a cut above the rest.
Yeah, he's done some incredible interviews since his retirement, Dan Toohey.
Yes.
His book is going to be good, to say the least, if he hasn't already blown all the good content. The Irish Examiner leads with John Fogarty's piece on return to play in Gaelic games. GAA to order inter-county teams not to train together until September. So we had a couple of reports coming in yesterday morning about this, but there has been a bit more of an official word from Croke Park over the last 24 hours or so. So inter-county teams will be told by the GAA that they cannot officially return to collective training until September. So that paves the way for them to meet John Horan's target of an October return to action for inter-county teams. So the details of this plan, they won't be released until the government confirmed today that phase 2 of its own roadmap will go ahead on Monday. I think most people would be surprised if that wasn't the case. We could even have a situation where certain parts of phase 3 get slotted in to phase 2. So not only is it expected, to quote from John Fogarty this morning, that pitches will, and with walkways, will reopen pending application next week. The GAA are set to allow training to resume on June 28, the start of the government's phase 3, instead of July 20. So that is a big leap forward. Club action is set to return in mid to late July, and John Fogarty has spoken to Micheál Bryody of the CPA about this, and he's voiced a couple of concerns, particularly due to the fact that I guess we've had evidence in the club month of April in previous years that inter-county teams would grab the club players and have them involved with the inter-county setup for a part of April, just so that they're ready to go for May. And he says running off county championships without county players training with their clubs would be the ultimate kick in the face to clubs after all they have done for the people of Ireland during the COVID-19 crisis. So that has to be a concern. But the question to Bryody really is, what is the alternative? Do you put the inter-county season before the club season? And I'm not sure if he would go for that either. One interesting line here from Fogarty: it is envisaged crowds will be able to attend championship games in the autumn. So that is the expectation from the GAA, that they hope to get this inter-county season played off. And that is probably why John Horan was saying we need to put the club game first, because that gives the inter-county game the best chance of having a few spectators involved. It would be shocking if you could have a full stadium come the end of the year, quite frankly, but we might have socially distanced crowds at games. It would be very interesting for an All-Ireland final, Adrian. How do you pick the 20,000 people who get into Croke Park if that is the ratio of people that get allowed in?
Even that seems like a monster number at this stage. But maybe a ground like Croke Park can afford to handle that, particularly because it's largely open air, obviously, as well. Yeah, it'll be interesting. The timeline, Owen, so we have it right, because there are other reports out there as well. The timeline seems to be that it'll be club championship in the shorter term, and then a return to inter-county collective training by coming towards the end of September, or certainly September at some point, with a view to games in October. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's look, that's interesting. It definitely felt, and I know there was obviously some speculation about this yesterday. It felt like even though it was just a tiny step, the attempt to try and reopen the walkways around the grounds was definitely the first step on the path to some sort of return to play. My view in it over the last week would have been that we're obviously working through these phases now. The coronavirus is very much, it appears at this juncture, it may change at any point, but under control in a way that we'd all been kind of working towards. In that context, if everything else is beginning to reopen, right, to some degree, like, you know, the stories in the front pages this morning about a lot of the department stores and high street shops are going to reopen with a few exceptions, but that's the way we're headed, right? And there'll be queues outside, and there'll be social distancing, and there'll be appointments, and there'll be all of that sort of stuff. But to a large degree, a lot of the shops and a lot of Ireland is reopening. So almost the GAA at that point is going to stand out like a sore thumb if it doesn't return. So I'd say that timeline seems fairly consistent. Like, if there's some blip in terms of coronavirus itself, in terms of like a second wave or whatever, we'll obviously all go back into our box and all of this stuff will be shelved again. But I mean, it wasn't my sense initially, I have to say. I know I mentioned it here as well, that I thought that the inter-county scene was always more likely to come back before the club scene, just because it's so unregulated. But this is the way they're going about it. They feel this is what makes most sense. There's going to be some official briefing, it seems, from up to now. It's been all sort of whispers, but some official briefing from Croke Park later today.
Yes, exactly. And then more as the next couple of days unfold as well, into next week, when we actually get to see what the GAA's COVID committee have actually come up with and what their return to play idea is, just to kind of rubber stamp it. But I think we've got a fairly good idea of what it's supposed to be, and there may not have been a huge amount of communication from the GAA over the last few weeks, but they've clearly been putting this plan together, and it looks like it's on course. And just to go back to the point, why would you put the inter-county game after the club game? I just think that there is a genuine belief within the GAA that they might be able to make some money this year, which is obviously going to come through the inter-county game, and that is why you want to put that last and second, put it after the club game in terms of a return to play.
Yeah, look, that in itself I think is an interesting question. Why do you want to have games back? Because it doesn't exist in the same space as the League of Ireland or the Premier League or professional rugby in this country, in that there aren't the same number of, there's not the same volume of jobs that are relying on it, I suppose.
Yeah, and it is interesting as well that, given the fact that they envisage crowds to be able to attend championship games in the autumn, what does that mean for the League of Ireland, for example? Like, that is a huge piece of news, that a sporting organisation in this country will be expected to have some crowds at their games. We can see how the League of Ireland just is looking at a very grim situation without getting supporters back into stadiums soon.
Do we have any sense on, maybe we don't, of in terms of the volumes of crowds that they can expect even outside of Croke Park? Like that, you know, there are a lot of grounds, even county grounds around the country that might not be the most modern setups in terms of facilitating whatever it is that's in place. Is there any sense from, like, as to how staggered the volume of fans will be?
I don't know, is the answer. I presume they would have to compile a list of grounds that would be suitable to do so. Park and Queeve would be the other one outside of Croke Park that would certainly spring to mind. The Semple Stadium potentially as well, just given the largeness of the stadium, if nothing else. Like with Croke Park, is it a situation where it might be easier to even close the hill and use 3 stands because you can clearly assign seating? Maybe we're at a stage in society already where we will be respecting the safe distance between people when they're standing in the hill as well. I would think that perhaps society will reach that point, but at the same time, maybe Croke Park will be one of the only safe places to have games with crowds before the end of the season. And like we should state this again, it's a percentage of a crowd, and John Fogarty is not saying that this is a guarantee, it's just envisaged, and it could be a potential thing that they have this year.
I don't know about depending on people, by the way. That's the one caveat, like any trip to the shop.
I'm too trusting a human being.
I've always said that about John, to be fair. So, right, well, look, there is a few more lines about that particular story in some of the other newspapers. The London Times is not one of them. The Ireland edition is very much focused on the Premier League. Chelsea win that race to land £53 million. Werner, writes Gary Jacob there. Martin Ziegler and Paul Joyce also writing about the story that Liverpool's possible title-winning game, this appears in a lot of the stories, is going to be against Everton on June the 21st. It's a 7 o'clock kickoff. It's going to be shown live on Sky Freeview, which is great news for people who don't have a subscription. And it's, as I said, it does appear in a lot of the back pages today. It's predicated, I think, on the basis that Man City would need to lose to Arsenal for that Liverpool-Everton game to be the one that clinches the title. It does seem that on that basis, it's sort of mildly ludicrous that a lot of the newspapers have that massive splash across the back page today, that it is like on the basis that your crowd are going to beat City.
Well, that's not going to happen. So it could be the one after. And after that, then it's Manchester City, isn't it, for City, Liverpool after Everton. So wouldn't be the worst consolation prize if they had to win the league against City rather than Everton. Back page of the Mirror is that exact story. Sunday Quest, 7 p.m. June 21st. Liverpool fans, put that date in your diaries. That's when you could end 30 years of hurt. Got a couple of other stories here from the world of football. Prem plan is a crowd pleaser. Premier League clubs believe there is a genuine chance of fans being allowed back into stadiums for the start of next season. In for the long haul, meanwhile, Shane Long has signed a new deal at Southampton, and Chelsea to hijack the Timo Werner deal, as we've already mentioned. There's also an exclusive interview here with Andy Cole, who's spoken a couple of times during the coronavirus lockdown, and fairly harrowing stuff. Considering what I've been through, if I make it to 50, I'll be made up. He says he'll be thankful to make it to 50 years of age after opening up about his ongoing health battle. Former United striker has been self-isolating during the coronavirus and has basically been revealing the huge mental and physical toll it has taken on him. He had a life-saving kidney transplant in 2017, and he says, I try not to look too far ahead and take it day by day.
Oh, it's incredible. The Irish Daily Star, I think, is my next port of call here. Date night, says Scott Coleman. It's an exclusive on, not to be seen in any of the back pages. They've got the inside track. Nobody else knew about this. The Star are themselves making the fixture list. June 21st, the date for Liverpool against Everton. Not much more needs to be said about that. But Kieran Cunningham also has that line that you mentioned earlier on in relation to GAA, that clubs to be given the green light to return. Club Championship football and hurling to be back next month. It was speculated on yesterday, obviously, in inter-county teams. Collective training can't resume, it's said, until September, and games a month later. And minimum 10 weeks then to run off the Club Championship within counties. The straight knockout at championship level at inter-county is still the likeliest outcome, it says there as well, just to underline that. I can't wait for that. I mean, I know we've been starved of, and that's part of the context, and the new championship is way better than the old championship, but now that it's coming, likely, I cannot wait for a straight knockout championship. It's going to be absolutely epic. I mean, it could be so good on that we end up just scrapping out everything that went before. It's unlikely. I'd get back to it. But coming from a county like Westmeath, I know that our championship is done in a couple of weeks and get on with just enjoying the rest of it. But I mean, it must give you sweaty palms.
Live sport gives you sweaty palms at the moment, I think. Unless the Premier League comes along and ruins it for everybody.
I mean, in relation to Kerry and the possibility that, like, you know, there have been times where a straight knockout would not have been kind to your lot. In fact, you'd probably be without a couple of All-Irelands on the basis of it. Sometimes you need a bit of time to warm up, is what I'm saying.
True. I'm impartial, as you know, and of course it would be nice to see Kerry back up in the Hogan stand from a neutral standpoint.
Yeah, right.
The Irish Times, possible Everton-Liverpool title decider set for June 21st is their lead story here. Provisional list for first 3 full rounds given to clubs. Acceleration of return to play expected, meanwhile. This is Sean Moran on the GAA's return to play. Clubs set to reopen later this month, with competitions returning in August. And Johnny Waterston, meanwhile, here's hoping Irish hockey's greatest team don't miss out on Olympic dream, which is a fairly realistic possibility that some of those heading to Tokyo next year just need to be mindful of. That does this Olympic Games actually happen? It's one thing trying to organise a group of localised people to attend a Gaelic football match with a lot of distance between them in Croke Park this winter, but trying to get people from all around the world to descend on one city for a huge sporting event next summer, is that going to come too soon? And of course, if it does, that is going to be one of the heartbreaking stories about that amazing night in Donnybrook we've seen already in this campaign will just essentially mean nothing because the hockey competition won't happen. So that's the Irish Times this morning.
Could we make a rule that now that there's actually some sport coming back and some sport to talk about, that wild speculation about something we've absolutely no idea at this juncture whether it's going to happen or not is not something we're going to engage in? Can we bring that in as well, OTB AM legislation? In
fairness, there has been official word from Japan this week that they are kind of concerned about what's going to happen next week. If it's not going to be called off completely, they're looking at a fairly scaled down Olympic Games. So it's not complete idle speculation.
How can they call it off? How would they even dream about calling it off now? Why would they do that? Like, on the basis that the globe gets on top of this thing soon?
Well, OK, they're not going to call it off now, but I guess they have to be prepared to face a situation in February or March 2021, where globally they may not be in a comfortable enough position to run a full-scale Olympic Games. Like, I'd personally think it is a grim outlook to think that it's not going to happen at all. But I think because the idea has already been floated this week that you could have a scaled-back operation for the Olympics, once that seed is planted, I think that could become a reality next year.
I don't know why you couldn't. I mean, he says, having just brought in legislation to say we can't talk about it. I don't know why you couldn't. The Olympics is like, why couldn't you just do it in 2022, for example?
Like, you're getting into the next Olympic cycle at that point, are you not?
But you're like, who cares? The cycle is gone. So, like, either don't do it or do it. Like, 2 years is plenty of time.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I don't see. It's a bit like the Ryder Cup. I just don't see the reason not to do it almost.
Like, I can't really disagree with you on that in terms of pushing it back even another year, but it just kind of gets farcical at that point, doesn't it, pushing it back by a full 2 years. I guess it wouldn't have any World Cup to compete with that summer because it'll be a Winter World Cup and it'll be a fairly fresh slate for them to kind of dominate the headlines.
Listen, a bit like the Star exclusive one, you heard it here first. The Telegraph, meanwhile, this morning have that Werner to Chelsea line. They've also got the RFU considering switch to summer rugby from Gavin Mayers there. We'll get Alan Quinlan's thoughts about that in just a little bit. It's effectively part of trying to have a joined up global calendar, so an interesting proposition there. Premier League relegation is an interesting line here. Clubs are going to wait. Premier League clubs are going to wait to see if the championship can be finished before they decide if, before they even take a hard stance, one way or the other, on whether there will be Premier League relegation. So there was a threat by the Premier League to oppose promotion from the championship if they couldn't finish their season. But effectively, what they're doing is we're going to wait and see, is what they're saying. If the championship can get it finished, then there's a case, obviously, for the teams that are finished towards the top end of that to legitimately and maybe even follow a legal path to insist on their promotion. And then at that point, you have to have the relegation. So we'll see. But they are operating a wait and see. It was a Chelsea suggestion as well, meaning that teams can now have 9 players on the subs bench and they can use 5 subs is part of the new COVID setup. And English Test cricket on, I know you're buzzing about this, it's back on the Beeb.
Nice one. Looking forward to that. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail, Werner U-turn. Chelsea set to nab £53 million hotshot as Reds go cold. Late night Liverpool title party on cards is their headline with regards to Liverpool potentially winning the Premier League against Everton. And Philip Quinn's got an interesting story here. call on government to review FAI rescue deal. This has been one of the stories that have done the rounds for the entire week about the memorandum of understanding that exists between the government and the FAI about the bailout and all the different changes that will be need to be made at the top of the FAI. And he's spoken to Fianna Fáil TD Mark McSharry, and he fears the simmering unrest prompted by the demands of this memorandum signed on January 30th could destroy football if allowed to fester. And to quote McSharry, "It is my view that the next government should revisit the MOU between the government and the FAI regarding this, and the increase on the FAI's board independent directors being increased from 4 to 6. The FIFA and UEFA statutes declare that a majority has to come from football." And then he also talks about calling FAI council members with more than 10 years of service. He calls that a betrayal of people who've given a lifetime of voluntary effort to grassroots football. So strong stuff from Mark McSharry this morning.
The Guardian, meanwhile, Reds could make it a Super Sunday with the title at Goodison Park, writes David Heitner and Jacob Steinberg here. A week ago, we were reading reports that this might all be unlikely given the temptation of fans to attend in some capacity, particularly when it's so close to home, as in Liverpool fans at Goodison Park. But they say now today that it is June 21st, as we've been mentioning, 7 o'clock kickoff, Freeview and Sky, and we shall see all that pans out. Also in the Guardian elsewhere, Robert Kitson is the story that England's top players could be set for a wage cut as everybody grapples with the idea of decreased revenues here, and tease inside as well to an interview with, I say a tease, Joshua Kimmich inside. It's strange to win and not celebrate with your fans, so I'm just hoping that the interview inside is a bit more interesting than that.
The front page of the Racing Post is ITV Heaven, live racing for all on ITV4. And the small line on top there, Superstar Stradivarius takes on Derby winner in Coronation Cup at Newmarket. A huge weekend of racing. And the back page of the Racing Post, French Connection can fire Foles to victory. That's a preview of Freiburg against Borussia Mönchengladbach tonight at 7:30.
The Irish Sun, Levy plea over fans as Spurs borrow £175 million, while Chelsea get Werner is the backstory here. Levy, the Spurs owner, obviously wants the UK government to allow fans back into the grounds, and he's saying that Spurs could be in line for losses of over £200 million.
The Irish News is next up from me. Study shows COVID infection more likely at training than in matches. This is the Stat Sports white paper that we mentioned on the show yesterday morning, which does indeed suggest that you're more likely to encroach on a player's 2-metre perimeter in training than you are in a match when it comes to Gaelic football. And Edouard, frustrated at falling short of 30, the French striker can't wait to celebrate Celtic's deserved title success. He was on 23 goals in 27 Scottish Premiership matches to help his side to a 13-point lead, and he was hoping to reach 30.
The Herald this morning has that news of Shane Long signing a contract extension at Southampton, and pointing out that some of his other Irish teammates maybe not so lucky and have an anxious wait to see if they can get their terms extended. Also that news about Timo Werner making the move to Chelsea, it looks as though, and also a story from Dan McDonnell and Aidan Fitzmaurice here that FAI hope to deliver League of Ireland clarity next week. Hopeful that clarity on the protracted debate around the proposed return of the League of Ireland can be delivered late next week is the story there.
Finally, let's have another look at what's on OTB Sports, and we're going to look at this through the prism of our brand new OTB Sports app this morning. So here's the personalised home feed with all of your latest sports news. So you can click on the radio tab to listen live to us this morning, or whatever's live on OTB Sports Radio, and you'll be able to listen to OTB Sports Radio all day long. So that's the radio tab, and then there's our video tab with all the latest from Off the Ball, and then our podcast, of course, as well, where you can subscribe to whatever series you want from OTB, and we are publishing over 40 podcasts per week at the moment. So you can get all of that and much more on the OTB Sports app. Just head to your App Store or the Google Play Store, and you can search for OTB Sports and download. It looks slick, Adrian. Yeah,
it looks very good, Eoin. You're going to get a full endorsement of you won't get any objections to that here. No, it's good. There's lots of it's essentially whatever you want, Eoin. There's no messing around is the short story with the app. You can get on there. If you jump on at the minute, you'll be prompted to watch the live video of this show, which, I mean, is the most awesome way to kick off your Friday morning. But it's easy to navigate. The video is great. It's audio, it's video, it's the written word on. What more do you need? There's lots of exclusives up there as well. I think we've got the exclusive about the Liverpool Everton game on June 21st.